Hey, folks, our usual live webinar with the coach. So I'm just going to wait for you guys to get on board, and then we're going to discuss optimizing metabolism today. So that'll be a good thing. We'll get going on that. We're going to discuss that from the diet point of view, diet perspective, diet strategy perspective. So as soon as we get some folks on board here, then I'm going to get started, and we're going to discuss optimizing metabolism. A little bit of research has to say on that, although it's not very well studied, well researched, but there is pertinent research that we can look at and that we will get to. So as usual, there's a bit of a delay here, so I'm just going to wait and see how many people are on board. And yeah, we're just going to wait and get people on board. I get a bit of a delay more than other people. So let me know you're out there, and we will get started whenever. So I've got one comment thus far letting me know that you guys are there. And then once we get to a few more people, then we'll definitely get into it. So good stuff. So I'm seeing some couple comments and just waiting on the numbers to build up. So and then again, optimizing metabolism. So a lot of you may have questions on that. Get them ready, and of course I will post those as we get going as well. So Jennifer says she's very excited for this, and she's following the cycle diet, and it's amazing. Appreciate that. Part of today's lecture will include elements of the cycle diet, why and how it's different from something like if it fits your macros that people keep asking me about. And it's all about optimizing metabolism. So people really got to understand that and know that, and most people don't. So it's unfortunate, but one of the realities out there is people are caught in what I call that North American diet mentality madness, that think that it's all about outside in formulations and calculations. And more and more the research that I present to you guys is all about its opposite. That it's really about inside out things that can't be measured. And that's the important stuff. So getting some people on board, and I was a couple minutes early, so I'll just give it one more minute and then we'll get going. But optimizing metabolism, I have been in the past sort of discussing it with you strictly from a training point of view and a muscle fiber type point of view and an energy systems point of view, basically the exercise front. So what we want to do now is sort of take this on the diet strategy front. And I can't get through all this in one day, of course, but I can certainly make a dent in it. So good that everybody is getting on board. Hit your share buttons, because I know this is a hot topic for people. And look, as I always say, the people out there that are struggling for weight loss, you lose weight in a compromised metabolism. That's weight that's never going to stay. And if metabolism is compromised enough, then that weight, when it comes back on, it's going to come back on with even more body fat and body weight than before. And no one talks about this. Everywhere you go is about 12-week transformations and how to lose weight now and yada, yada, yada. And no one talks about the optimized metabolism, which is very, very strange to me as an expert that other experts just don't get this. But of course, down the road, they start riding my coattails and say stuff, but they don't really understand it. So I'm going to get into it, folks. I'm going to get to a study that I've been using. Now, I didn't, Perry will put in the comment sections, but I did not, I didn't copy the study in order to paste it. So, I'll get to that, but it's going to be plain and simple for you right here. Everybody can see that, hopefully clear as a bell. And then I will get to that and move myself over here so we can see it. And then I'm going to get to here and hopefully you can see these. So here's a study now. I'm going to get to optimize metabolism and all those things, but just want to show up a study of processed versus whole foods and the metabolic effects of that. So this particular study that I'm going to cover, a processed food meal has 50% less diet-induced thermogenesis. You're going to hear that a lot in the next hour. So DIT, diet-induced thermogenesis. But a processed food meal has 50% less thermic effect than a whole food meal. So anyone who follows my cycle diet, things like that, know that it's concentrated and centered on healthy, unprocessed whole foods for the diet days, and only during refeed days is other foods recommended or allowed. Now, this differs completely from if it fits your macros, which says eat whatever you want as long as you have these magic numbers within which it fits. And there's all kinds of problems with that. So here's the general citation, folks, by the name of the article here: Postprandial energy expenditure in whole food and processed food meals, implications for daily energy expenditure. And you can find this in Food and Nutrition Research Journal, 2010, and there's the issue number, et cetera, et cetera. So once again, I am bringing you, actual, research, academic study. Now, I will say, one of the things here about this study, I wish they had to use different food for comparison. I wish it would have been something really even more whole food centered, and I think we would have saw an even bigger variation, an even bigger difference. But research is kind of behind where I'm at with all this stuff after 4 decades. But I really wish they had have used something like comparing, say, what they used here, the cheese sandwiches, to say something like one of my meals, which would be roasted almonds with as much fruit as I could eat. And I think we would see a huge difference there. But moving on. So processed food versus whole food, which burns faster? Whole or processed cheese sandwiches were used here, and they made sure in the research that the meals were comparable in terms of macronutrient breakdown and composition. So this is very important there. They made sure that there was no difference in satiation. In other words, all this stuff about calorie equations, and as long as it meets your satiety, in other words, you're no longer hungry, then that's all you should think about. But here, as you see in the conclusion section here, ingestion of the particular processed food meal tested in this study decreases postprandial energy expenditure by nearly 50% compared to the isoenergenic whole food meal. 50%, folks, 50%. I'll explain that in non-academic terms as we go along, because I know, some fancy words like postprandial and isoenergetic and things like that the message can get lost there. So the important thing here in the start of the study that I've put in these blue boxes, Perry has put in these blue boxes, I should say. So both processed and whole food meals satisfied the hunger. So there's no difference there. They were of equal caloric level. But as we see here, this is what you want to focus on here is this middle chart. There's a whopping difference in terms of stagnant versus optimized metabolic effects from the foods you choose. Not their calorie counts, but the foods that you choose. Boom. All right. So that's the first boom of the day. So quality of food intake is more important than calorie equivalence. Therefore, it doesn't fit your macros. It's not about if it fits your macros. I can't believe that if it fits your macros has thousands and thousands of followers, but so be it. But that these people don't understand this stuff doesn't change the facts. So you can have your own opinion, but you can't have your own facts. So like I said, I wish there was more studies like this. I'm going to get to some other stuff in a minute. But on the next page, what we see here now is the thermodynamic effects, what I'm talking about. You'll see what I highlighted in yellow. Processed food meal is more thermodynamically efficient than the comparable whole food meal, even though it's the exact same meal, folks. It was the exact same meal, cheese sandwiches, either whole food or as processed food stuff. So, and this confers metabolic disadvantage in relation to obesity, because this was an obesity study. So hear that now. This confers a metabolic disadvantage in relation to obesity. The diet-induced thermogenesis of the processed food meal was 46.8% lower than the diet-induced thermogenesis of the whole food meal. Like, holy crap, folks, 46.8%. The difference in diet-induced thermogenesis results in an almost 10% increase in net energy gain from the processed food meal. And I'll tell you what that means in a second. Let me just read the rest of this. A higher thermogenic response was observed after a meal composed of whole foods, of course, than after an equivalent and isocaloric meal comprised of highly processed foods. The lower diet-induced thermogenesis of the processed food meal indicates greater net energy assimilation. Now, that's a lot of academic speak, and I'm going to explain to that to you in a minute. But what does it mean so far, all this scientific speak? It means processed foods are digested much less metabolically expensively than whole foods. Notice the term that I read, metabolic disadvantage. Okay, so it confers a metabolic disadvantage in relation to obesity. So all this, if it fits your macros, oh, you can have your snack size Snickers bar, and you can have, your bacon, as long as this stuff fits your macros, and you can follow these magic formulas, all outside in stuff. Well, it doesn't speak to any of this. When the metabolic disadvantage is a whopping almost 50% lower than if you choose healthy whole foods. So that's incredible. So this means that processed foods have little metabolic impact regarding optimization of metabolism, something that I'm trying to force into the public psyche, that people will start understanding this stuff, while whole food meals have large impact by capitalizing on diet-induced thermogenesis. And of course, this does not support something like if it fits your macros. And that's very, very important as well, because mindset determines behavior, and quality of mindset determines quality of behavior. You know that's one of my Abelisms. And the thing here is, if you're going to find a formula and spend your hours and minutes crunching numbers so that you can have tortilla chips and salsa, or potato chips and dip, or Snacks Nice Snickers bar, then that's the faulty mindset you're working with from the beginning, because you're not changing your attitude toward food. You're not doing anything about optimizing metabolism physiologically, but you're also not doing anything about altering how you look at food. So this is very, very important. So I'll just go back a bit to the thermodynamic effects. So again, there's very little optimization of metabolism in eating processed foods. However, and this is where we get to sort of my stuff here, if we're in an optimized, efficient, revving metabolism, then overeating, even on processed foods, is going to have a substantial effect on diet-induced thermogenesis because of sheer volume of caloric intake. And this is the foundation of my cycle diet and the importance of well-timed refeeds, not just refeeds, but overfeeds. Another difference between the cycle diet and if it fits your macros, is trying to taunt you with little bits and pieces of processed foods or hyperpalatable foods, whereas the cycle diet wants you to overeat on them, specifically to engage in a hypermetabolic effect. And that's something you don't see studied in the literature. It's not going to be studied in the literature. It is in my cycle diet course and book, however. So few, if any, studies, including this one, examine the effects of well-timed refeeds or overfeeds, even though it's something I've been studying for decades. So the specific dynamic effect of digestion and diet-induced thermogenesis effects of foods has to be considered if you want a truly optimized metabolism where you can not only lose weight, but keep it off and manage weight for a lifetime, even in what we call critical periods, like in physique after 50, where metabolism starts slowing down, and so do other anabolic functions. So these are things that must be considered that you're not going to find anywhere in most of the research. This has nothing to do with numbers. It should be qualitative over quantitative, and this does not support the argument for if it fits your macros. All this outside in, calculate this formula, calculate this many calories, and as long as it fits, have your Snickers bar or have your potato chip or have your hot dog, is not what the research actually shows. And that's unfortunate because, again, people are all about body conscious first and weight loss first, and metabolism isn't even on their radar screen, whereas I'm presenting to you that it should be the other way around. Metabolism first, and then we can worry about the other things in a proper context of metabolism. Hopefully that makes sense. I'll just see if there's any good comments yet. Okay, we're good there. Okay, I'm going to go back. So that's really important. Hopefully you guys are following me on this, because you know, this is important stuff. So, you know, if I'm making a point or you got a question, type it in, throw some emoticons across the screen, whatever. So, you know, my point here is that common sense ain't so common. And I'm so tired of 12-week transformations and all this outside in. Look at how smart my guru is. He has this formula for calculating calories. And, you know, now I need a Fitbit. Like, it shouldn't require a lab coat and a calculator, folks, to get in shape and stay in shape. And your body knows better than any formula you can come up with. And that's what this study reflects. Okay, so future studies are required to determine whether a reduction in diet-induced thermogenesis is characteristic of processed foods in general. Diets with a high proportion of processed foods will result in increased energy assimilation. All right, the gathering of means assimilation, and may be a contributor to weight gain. Let's think about that. So a reduction in diet-induced thermogenesis is considered to be characteristic of processed foods in general. I don't think that's a big surprise. But now let's look at this other one. Diets with a high proportion of processed foods are going to result in increased energy assimilation and may be a contributor to weight gain. So processed foods are likely to make you fatter, whether you're in a calorie-controlled environment or not. So again, this is about context, all right? Outside-in formulas that say stay within this amount of calories and eat whatever you want is misleading in general, because it does not consider certain metabolic realities that can't be measured. Am I making sense? Yeah, hopefully. So hopefully that's making sense. I just seeing if there's any comments I needed to post. So this latter point here, folks, is important. Let's latch onto this one more time before I go to the next screen. Diets with a high proportion of processed foods are going to result in increased energy assimilation, the gathering of, and may be a contributor to weight gain. So even in a calorie-controlled environment, you know, all this stuff. Now, one of the things I wanted to point out, it's not just if it fits your macros that pisses me off. It's things like Nutritionism and all these other ones that have used Marie Osmond for the last 49 years. And every year she's lost 50 pounds on their new version of it. Isn't that interesting? Of course, if you read the small print on the commercials, the really, really small print, even with the other people who are plugging this nonsense, it says on it, weight lost on a previous program. Anyway, the thing about these things that have your meals sent to your door is that they are processed foods. All you're trying to operate within then is very, very extreme levels of portion control. Now think about this. If me and let's say three of the other men on here, Andreas and Perry, we all order Nutrisystem, all right? And we order a month's supply. We all get the same meals. There's no context for assessing our metabolisms. So right there, we have a problem, because my metabolism is not going to be the same as Perry's, and it's not going to be the same as Andrea's. So right there, now what about diet-induced thermogenesis? Well, since Nutrisystem is just highly processed food, flash frozen, and sent to your door, well, look at this statement. Diets with a high proportion of processed foods will result in increased energy assimilation and be a contributor to weight gain. But there's more. But wait, there's more. If you order now, but wait, there's more. My point is, but wait, there's more. If you follow their nonsense now, Nutrisystem and the rest, oh, sorry, I'm on a rant here. Now they have craving crusher shakes that you can get almost for free if you order blah, blah, blah right now. Well, what we know about craving crusher shakes is this. Shakes are also processed foods. So those are processed foods. Not only will they crush your cravings, but they'll stop your weight loss and probably lead to weight gain. So these Nutrisystem things that are supposed to solve weight gain actually can induce it and make it stagnant, because once again, the focus first is on weight, and it's not on metabolism, because they can't huckster you metabolism, because they can't coach you through reading your biofeedback and your metabolism. And hopefully that's starting to sink through on people. And it's very, very important stuff. So in terms of this study, implications for if it fits your macros, which is so popular online. These outside-in approaches, like if it fits your macros, simply can't address elements of metabolic optimization. They just don't. So to ingest processed foods as treats because it fits some magic outside-in formula never addresses your own metabolic profile. It just doesn't. Only by identifying something like supercompensation mode, a la the cycle diet, can you identify an optimized metabolism that is ripe for refeeds and won't be hurt by taking in processed foods. Won't be harmed, won't be hurt, won't be negatively impacted, are the things that I want to get to there. Now, this particular rate, going back to this one, don't forget, diets with a high proportion of processed foods are going to result in increased energy assimilation and can be attributed to weight gain. So this means that you can still get fat and get heavy even if processed food treats fits your macros. Even when it does fit your macros and you've spent all day calculating how you can fit in a couple bites of an O. Henry, you can still get bigger off that because there's no optimizing effect on metabolism from that. And that's really, really important stuff. So I'm going to, you know what, I'm going to hold off. I'm going to hold off because we're getting some good comments. And if I stray too far into that, I'm likely to go rant crazy. And I don't want to go rant crazy because, you know, these PowerPoint slides actually keep me in line, folks. So there's an important element to that. So now there's more metabolic realities to consider as well. Let's consider the reward circuitry of the brain. And I've talked about this before. My book, Beyond Metabolism, that you see behind me here, is all about hyperpalatable foods and research that from a young age, once we've experienced hyperpalatable foods, something that our ancestors never experienced, that lights up the reward centers of our brain, the opioid centers of our brain, to always want those foods. So if you start saying if it fits your macros, you can still have those foods, you're never going to train yourself to not want those foods or not be induced or put under a spell by those foods. And what is known as bliss point research says a lot about this. In other words, scientists for various food countries are hard at work looking at various food combinations to find the bliss point of any particular food that they want to manufacture and sell. And what a bliss point is it's the right combination of salt, fat, and sugar in various combinations, depending on what you're trying to sell, whether it's a salty food, a sweet food, or a fatty food. They look for the bliss point. What point does it maximally light up the reward centers, the opioid centers of the brain, much like a drug does, that they can capitalize on, because if you eat it once, you'll want more, that kind of thing. So that's what, you know, what was that old, I bet you can't eat just one? That's literal from the kind of research that goes on. So they look for the bliss point of manufacturing a certain product, and they sell that to you knowing that if it hits your bliss point the right way, instead of too much salt or too much fat or too much sugar, but if they find the bliss point in a certain commercial food stuff, then you're going to be pretty helpless against it. And some people are more hypersensitive to this than other people. And this is all in my book, Beyond Metabolism and Understanding Metabolism as well. So once again, if it fits your macros, it isn't going to address any of this stuff. So I don't understand. It would be like taking a small hit of heroin, or if you're an alcoholic and you're used to drinking 9 drinks a day, well, now you'll just have 2 drinks a day. You know, if it fits your overall, you know, it doesn't make sense. So small rewards and snacks can have a net zero metabolic influence, but at the same time, as you know, as this study shows, a net zero metabolic influence and still lead to weight gain, but still trigger a desire for you to keep wanting those foods. So you're going to live out the rest of your life in a state of temptation. That doesn't make any sense to me. And you're going to tease that state of temptation constantly by having it fit your macros, that you can cut a Snickers bar in half, and what are you going to do with the other half, and all those other things. You're just teasing your brain to want more of the thing you shouldn't be wanting. That doesn't make any sense. So Furthermore, the non-diet induced thermogenetic effect of processed food means that these foods are more likely to go through nutrient partitioning toward fat storage. All right. And that just, I mean, that's just common sense. So here's the graph from the research. Whole foods, you can see how much higher whole foods is above a basal metabolic rate. And this reflects on the optimizing effects on metabolism of diet-induced thermogenesis of whole foods. And look at how low the line is for processed foods, and this very narrow marginal effect at all to optimize metabolism. And as I said in the beginning, I wished they used a different standard. I wish they used a truly whole food meal that was more plant-based, and you would see this number spike even more. I have no doubt about that. So that's very, very important stuff as well. So the whole foods cycle diet versus if it fits your macros, because a lot of people were saying, well, Scott, on your cycle diet, why would I wait for one special day a week to overeat on all my favorite foods where I can space them out through the week and have a little bit of all of them all the time? Well, hopefully now you're seeing why. That it doesn't work metabolically. That's not how you build an optimized metabolism. Supercompensation mode is a term that I used to describe the metabolic mode of an optimized metabolism by staying in a relative deficit, all right, for a long period of time with well-timed calorie spikes of refeeds of any kind of foods. And it's called supercompensation mode because your body supercompensates by creating situational hypermetabolic rate, burning off those extra calories in a thermic effect because your metabolism has been trained to do so. This is entirely different than if it fits your macros and you space those processed foods out through the week. All you're going to do is more likely have them be partitioned toward fat storage, as the previous statement from this research actually showed. So it's different because the cycle diet is a relative deficit diet with healthy whole foods on the diet days as the most important element of that. If it fits your macros is about outside in number crunching attempts to control food. So again, we're talking about the difference that if it fits your macros is absolutely quantitative in nature, and cycle diet is all about gauging biofeedback of hunger, satiation, appetite, tolerable hunger, which is also in my book, Beyond Metabolism. So qualitative elements are always going to supersede quantitative considerations, and yet in the North American diet mentality, that very seldom factors in. In the North American diet mentality, it's all about magic numbers, and it's all about all these other things. Boy, you guys, some really good comments that I'm going to get to. I love it when you guys compete. My numbers may be low, folks, but we get some smart people on here, and that's good enough for me. So this is really, really important stuff. So more on the whole foods, the cycle diet versus if it fits your macros. If it fits your macros, fails to consider the qualitative inside-out reality of hunger, satiation, the feedback loop that is hunger and satiation, metabolism, reward circuitry of the brain. Why would you want to constantly be lighting that up to tease yourself to want more of something you're trying to control? Makes no sense. In diet-induced thermogenesis. Most people simply don't understand this, and you don't want the consumers to have to understand complicated stuff, because if you can convince them of something else, if you can convince them of magic formulas and magic numbers, then that's a lot easier than explaining to them the qualitative elements of things involved here. So now here's another important one. I'm just going to light this one up for you folks. Hopefully you can see that. Until the taste buds are trained to be equally accepting of non-hyperpalatable foods as hyperpalatable foods, weight loss efforts are likely to fail. This is another reason why I don't like if it fits your macros. You're not going to sustain much of an absolute calorie deficit for very long, especially if at the same time you're teasing your taste buds with hyperpalatable foods and you're still rejecting developing a palate for non-hyperpalatable foods, for healthy whole foods. See, the thing about the cycle diet is it cycles not only relative deficits, but it cycles healthy whole food, unprocessed food meals in a way that is going to eventually mature your palate to handle, not only handle healthy whole foods, but to enjoy them. So even though I'm on the cycle diet and I look forward to my refeed days, It doesn't mean I hate all my other days. I like the foods I eat because I've developed a palate for non-hyperpalatable foods that don't have bliss points. So I get my sugars from my fruit, I get my starches, all those kind of things, and you develop a palate for healthy, whole, unprocessed foods. So until the taste buds are trained to be equally accepting of non-hyperpalatable foods as hyperpalatable foods, weight loss efforts are likely to fail. And there's a lot of people who play at weight loss who are obese forever, and they play games with weight loss because they can never get to that point. Here's the thing, folks. I've been 4 decades into this, and I've had plenty of clients lose anywhere from 50 to 100 pounds, and a few lose 100 pounds. We'll be doing one of those in an upcoming transformation. I haven't had a single client in 4 decades who ever took off massive amounts of weight and kept it off by not retraining their taste buds to not only accept but enjoy healthy, whole, unprocessed foods in their natural state. It simply can't be done, even though you want to tease yourself that it can. That's why I say the cycle diet is still living in the real world of food abundance, because not only can you indulge in hyperpalatable foods, but you do it in a controlled way in the right metabolic context, and you don't try to deny that you're never going to eat said foods again, which is a lot different than teasing yourself with them every single day. That makes no sense to me. If it fits your macros, makes no sense to me. And if it did, I would jump on board. I've been at this 4 decades, and I'm more about doing right than being right. It just so happens that I'm being right most of the time. So here's the thing. The body can't be tricked with outside-in nonsense. All right? The body can be trained and programmed as we do with the cycle diet. Don't forget what the cycle diet means. Cycling regular relative calorie deficits, underfeeding, with regular calorie refeeds, overfeeding. So we're cycling that in a way that trains metabolism. So we train and program our metabolism. Simply put, if it fits your macros, is so limited in scope, and I don't get why people can't understand that. It just makes no sense to me. So key lessons here: a calorie is not a calorie, and even if it is, so what? Again, that's in my book, Understanding Metabolism. Whole foods do dozens of things once inside our bodies that we can't even begin to calculate and put into numbers. The body knows. And as I always use Einstein's quote here, not everything that counts can be counted. Diet-induced thermogenesis isn't something some fitness bunny and some personal trainer can go around and measure with you. And that's why something like if it fits your macros and low-carb keto nonsense and the rest of it works in the industry. It works for sales because they can use outside-in formulas and just throw them at you. But it's not how your body works. It's not understanding your own body. So that's important. Calorie counting and macro formula outside-in approaches are completely limited in scope. At best, they're kindergarten starting points. Even I use caloric approaches at the beginning of the cycle diet because I know that's where most of the consumers are coming from when they read something. Well, where do I start? So I give them a start base, but right from there, we switch from outside in to inside out considerations. And that's another off point that is very, very important to understand. So hopefully that's registering. Healthy, whole, unprocessed foods, plant-based foods make the most sense. If it fits your macros, there's a lot of useless math likely to lead to food obsession for one thing, running around with your Fitbit and you're looking at the back of packages of junk food to see how much you can get away with. You shouldn't be trying to get away with anything. Again, you can't trick your body. You're not going to fool your body by eating 100 calories of Snickers bar or licorice and think that your body doesn't know the difference between 100 calories of that and 100 calories of an apple. Your body knows the difference, and that's what this research shows. So you can't do any of that stuff, and I worry about the obsession it creates to try to do so. Oh, I'm going to trick my body. I'm on if it fits your macros, so I can have a hot dog every day, and I can have, I can have pudding for breakfast, or I can have a muffin at the office. That's not going to work for very long. But people honeymoon on all kinds of ridiculous diet programs. So watch out for people who are plugging something, who are just celebrating a honeymoon period. Inside out is always the better approach. And biofeedback, tolerable hunger versus ravenous hunger, watching out for not developing a taste and a penchant and a palate for unprocessed, healthy whole foods. That simply has to be done if anyone's going to be successful, and shame on any wannabe guru who says otherwise. So now, why aim for an optimized metabolism? Well, there's lots of reasons, because I live in the real world. So planned short duration and long duration refeeds don't hurt you cosmetically. That's one reason. People want to maintain a healthy weight. They want to look good. When you have an optimized metabolism, then your weight returns right back to normal. Metabolism stays humming. The examples I've used over and over again. Last year, I went to Dubai, 2.5 weeks off my diet, eating at the Cheesecake Factory every day, eating here, eating there, enjoying the vacation and not being guilt tripping about what I'm eating or not eating. Come back home, body goes right back to normal. Every year when I go to Aruba, 2+ weeks, I make the food part of my vacation because I'm in an optimized metabolism. Come back. As a matter of fact, people don't even notice that I've gained weight anymore. It's just something that I notice. Whereas other people, they go on vacation and they gain 10 pounds and they can't lose it. Unplanned diet indiscretions don't set you back. Your weight returns to normal quickly if you have an optimized metabolism. Had a client write me just yesterday, I was putting all this together, and he reminded me he was away for a week at an Indian wedding, an East Indian wedding, and this is something that goes on for a week. And he was just like, Scott, forget about trying to follow my diet, like just out the window, because he was part of the wedding party and it was a party every day and blah, blah, blah. Long story short, he got back 4 days later. His weight was right back where it started before he left. Someone else would not be in the same metabolic framework. So without an optimized metabolism, weight gain is more likely. And look at the research that I just showed you. If some of the foods that you were choosing, I'm just going to snack a little bit. You know, all these people that buy these Halloween-sized candies and put them in their cupboard because they feel less guilty. Well, what did I show in the above graph at the top? You know, with that kind of processed food, weight gain is still more likely. So, you know, you're not fooling your body. You only think you can. And the example is also research on this time of year in the USA. Research shows that people gain the most weight between the US Thanksgiving and New Year's every year. They vow to take it off and they seldom do. And that's because they don't have optimized metabolisms. They have compromised metabolisms. So as they eat the junk food and take in the alcohols, and they don't have an optimized metabolism for dealing with that, they put on weight in a compromised metabolic framework context, and then that weight becomes harder and harder to take off. So that's really, really important. And then finally, one of the things, wow, I'm going to get to your comments. Finally, one of the things, now, you guys have seen this before. I'm going to bring out the mammoth, all right, the mutant. All right, Understanding Nutrition and Health and Disease, a 3,000-page textbook. All right, now this is on page 1,640, so 1,640 pages into it. Thank you very much. Talking about, I wanted more studies of healthy whole foods from the plant-based perspective, so I went to the vegetarian section. And it says, some investigators report that vegetarians weigh less than non-vegetarians, with the difference, the lower weight vegetarian consistent with lower intake of calories that is often reported. The energy yielding nutrients, protein and fat, are generally consumed in somewhat greater amounts by non-vegetarians, whereas larger amounts of carbohydrates are consumed by vegetarians. Carbohydrates. Larger amounts are consumed by vegetarians, and that most investigators report vegetarians weigh less than non-vegetarians. The result of this difference is that vegetarians tend to have lower energy intake and lower body mass index than do omnivores. They're closer to the desirable weight and closely approximate dietary recommendations for the distribution of macronutrients than do omnivores. Vegetarians also demonstrate more desirable weight patterns than omnivores. In addition to the higher intake of carbohydrates of vegetarians, let me say that again, the higher intake of carbohydrates of vegetarians is less efficiently converted to body fat. That's what this is all about. The higher intake of carbohydrates in vegetarians is less efficiently converted to body fat. All right, and this leads to a greater control of food And then they go on to other things. So greater amounts of fiber, which also enhances satiation. So it's also about, they take in greater amounts of carbohydrates. Those carbohydrates maximize diet-induced thermogenesis and digestive utilization and demands. That, in essence, uses calories, boosts metabolism, keeps metabolism in hypermetabolic mode or optimized mode, and is a closer link to hunger satiation centers than is other processed foods. Now, this textbook, page 1060, if you're interested, that also speaks to now the closer element, not just of carbohydrates, but unrefined carbohydrates. And that's an important thing to consider as well. So very, very important stuff. So before I close this down, there's why you aim for some of the resources here. If you want to find out about inside out metabolic optimization, the Cycle.diet is the actual course. The Cycle Diet book is right there. That's the link there. My book, Understanding Metabolism, that proves to you that a calorie isn't a calorie. Even if you're calorie counting, calorie equivalents are never calorie equivalents. I explain all that in the book. An exact same size apple will have different caloric impact and glycemic impact depending upon where that apple was grown in the orchard, the amount of sunlight it got, when it was harvested, yada, 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 and it goes on and on and on. So you think outside in is just an illusion of control because you think you have control. But like I said, it's a very kindergarten place to start. What you really need is someone to help you learn how to gauge things like inside out biofeedback, like tolerable hunger, hunger and satiation, and all these other things. So really, really, really important stuff that no one's talking about. And it's, you know why no one's talking about it, folks? Because no one understands it. They don't look into this stuff because it's too qualitative and messy and they can't sell it. So they don't care what's right. They care what they can sell. And then once that penetrates the consumer mindset, that's all that matters. So if they can sell you a 30-day metabolic fix that's based on nonsense like intermittent fasting and cutting your carbs, they're going to sell that nonsense to you because you're going to buy it. So they don't care that the rest of the stuff that I'm talking about is messy and complicated because they can't sell it. And they're interested in what they can sell. I'm interested in what I can use to help and what I can use that's been right for decades. So again, don't forget that the Cycle Diet was born in the real world of research. It wasn't born in a library somewhere like the rest of this stuff, like paleo and all this other stuff. The Cycle Diet was born in the real world of my bodybuilding experience and how once I got lean enough, how I could overeat and it wouldn't affect me cosmetically. I would just look better. And those stories are in the actual Cycle Diet book, etc. So that's the lecture. I'm going to get to your comments. And boy, I'm glad we got some smart people coming on board. I'm going to have to scroll down, folks. And I guess this is the way it's going to be for a while, unless I'm doing non-lecture type formats, because if I get into your comments while I'm still lecturing, I'm likely to get off on Scott Abel tangents. So I apologize that I wait till the end, but it's very, very important study, or the important that I get through all I have to say before I entertain the comments. So Perry's just saying, yeah, what an eye-opening this study was. I just wish there was more studies like it. And it's not usually the kind of study I prefer to use to make a point. But it does reflect my levels of experience dealing with people, thousands of people over and over the years. So, but I wish they had chose a different meal rather than cheese sandwiches. There's better things that they could have chosen. So really, really important stuff there. So let me scroll up, find out where I left off here. Hopefully, Jennifer M., I won't try to say your last name. You said you were excited for this webinar. I hope it lived up to your excitement. So let me know on that. So and here's a link to the abstract. I'll just put that on there briefly. If you want to replay this and then copy and paste this, you certainly can. So hopefully people are getting to it and getting to know all that stuff. So Andre's just saying biochemically, metabolically, hormonally, foods are not the same. There's different digestion, utilization, simulation, hyperpalatable foods, trigger alarms to our brains. Not so much alarms, but it certainly wakes them up to want more and more of those foods. And more people are more sensitive to that than other people. And that's something that, again, no one's measuring. When you're talking about numbers, no one's saying, well, maybe you're more hypersensitive to rewarding foods, hyperpalatable foods, than the next person. And maybe that's a reason that, outside in calorie counting stuff maybe is a dangerous place for you. So that's very, very important. When you light up the opioid centers of your brain wants more of those things. That's how addictions become addictions. So very, very important. As Andreas just going on about things, various things from my books, calories don't measure metabolism. Yeah, all those things. So very, very important. Oops, sorry, Moni B. So the calorie is a calorie is a calorie really isn't a calorie. I love that one. Yeah, correct. Yeah. I don't, people use calories because it starts somewhere, but people forget that a calorie is a measure of a unit of heat. It was never really meant to be something used the way it's being used now. It's kind of a bastardization of the whole concept. So, and then Janine's just asking, is this kind of relate to how everyone's basal metabolic rate is different so that these systems can't possibly work? They can work, but it's to what degree and what matter of degree. It's kind of like the square peg in the round hole. You might be the one person that peg fits. You're a square peg in a square hole, but then you go out telling everyone else, this is how I did it, and this is how you should do it. And then that's when it's, sort of falls apart. That's why what I said earlier about Nutrisystem and all this other stuff makes no sense. So, and the other thing, Andreas is just reminding me of, Nutrisystem. I want to throw a brick at the screen. And when I see that, order now and get our craving crushing shakes, that somehow hunger is something to be avoided at all costs, and that somehow hunger is unnatural. So if you get hungry eating our crappy boxed food, well, don't worry, you can have these crappy shakes to fill in the blanks as well. So you're never going to be hungry, but somehow you're supposed to lose weight. Here's the chi-chi on that, folks. Here's the straight skinny on that. Hunger and cravings go together with leanness. The leaner you get, the hungrier you're going to get, and the more wild cravings you're going to have. Anyone who's ever competed in a physique contest can tell you that. That's why people don't stay at 10% or lower body fat year round, because it's impossible, because hunger increases so much that it's not sustainable. So to continue treating cravings like they're unnatural makes no sense. Cravings and hunger are part of the weight loss experience. It's what you do about them that matters. So, and then Perry's just saying Bliss Point research or some quick reading. You can look at this if you want later, folks, how the food industry helps engineer our cravings. They're always going to be ahead of us. So that's what you need. Now, you can either accept you live in the world of food abundance with really tasty, tasty foods and go and try to have a disciplined, intelligent way to deal with that, which I think the cycle diet is. Or you can try to fight that and pretend that you don't live in that world and that you're never going to eat such and such ever again, which to me is just foolhardy. So, and then Ashley's just saying, that's why it's important to figure out our trigger foods, treat them like other addictions. They can be eliminated from the diet. Hyperpalatable, highly addicting, weight loss, sabotage, whole foods all the way. Yep, and there's a place for highly indulgent foods, and it can be used as a reward. But when you're teasing yourself on a regular basis in a metabolic context that can't handle it, and what we saw above when I showed in the research, the researchers point that processed food are likely to lead to weight gain, even in a calorically controlled situation, then you're adding to the problem, So it's very, very important to realize that. Now, for me, I have all kinds of trigger foods. It's just that after all this many years on the cycle diet, it's not something I even think about. I'm not fighting temptation or resistance because I don't have to, because I can engage those things on a given day of the week, and I can do it in a mature way. And I like the challenge of a cycle diet, and I like knowing that most of the time I'm eating a healthy, whole food, unprocessed diet. So it's very, very important. So, yeah. So, and then Andrea, he's a chatterbox today. Yeah, the illusion of control, thinking that you can quantify everything, Fitbits and everything. And don't forget, earlier on in my podcast, early this season, or when I first started them, that research from Pittsburgh that was showing that Fitbits, they can start out where people think they're really helpful, and then it crashes. And then people think they're really harmful because people are trying to resist them, fight against them. And actually, for some people, using those things leads to depression, which doesn't surprise me at all, because I've dealt with eating disorders now for 25 plus years, clients with eating disorders. So very, very important. So again, what we see is that all this outside in number crunching stuff provides an illusion of control, but it's more about making your personal trainer or coach look intelligent than it is about how your body really works. So the more complicated the formula, the more leery you should be of it. And that's the fact. So very, very important that we look at that. So, and then Andy's just reminded me of Michael Pollan's famous comment, if it comes from a plant, eat it. If it was made in a plant, don't. And that's sort of the starting point for all your diet days on the cycle diet, obviously not on your refeed days. The way I like to put that now, Andy, Bob says hello, by the way. The reason I changed that now, so it doesn't sound too restricting, is I say on your diet days, eat like you're an adult, and on your refeed days, eat like you're a kid. And I think that is a better fit. So, and then Ashley's just saying, her palate came alive going whole food plant-based. It's not just that, and I'm sure it did, but what I found over the years is that it also transitioned my taste buds to be much more sensitive. Stuff that I used to eat before is on my refeed days is now just way too sweet or just way too hyperpalatable, that it's past, for me personally, it's past the bliss point. Whereas other people who don't have sensitized taste buds, these food researchers create a bliss point that has to be more hyper and hyper palatable. But for people who have trained their taste buds, a little goes a long way. So it's very important. For instance, like, you can get by with a little French vanilla in my coffee is an orgasm for my taste buds, but for someone else, they got to have a mocha latte with cream, double foam, extra whip, blah, 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 because they're so non-sensitized in their taste buds that they just need more and more to get that hyperpalatable food fix. And that's another thing. So the benefits to the healthy, whole, unprocessed food is so qualitative that I could go on here for another hour on the things that can't be measured about that everyone's pointing out, especially Ashley and everyone else. So very important. So how about chia pudding for breakfast? I don't know what that's supposed to mean, Mary, but if that's what floats your boat and it's completely unprocessed, then giddy up, Buttercup. Andy's just saying that he was at a photo shoot once and there was a female model who had portions of Fruit Loops cereal measured out to fit her macros. Yeah, it gets insane, folks. It gets insane. And this is what we don't realize. I make a point every year of watching when the hyperpalatable foods come out. So I watch when Halloween foods come out. They come out right after Labor Day. And I've always begged the question to me, who's buying these big bags of hyperpalatable Halloween snacks when it's only September? Well, obviously, it's adults who are buying that. So these food things, oh, I'm going to keep it for Halloween. Well, by the time Halloween comes, they've gone through 3 bags of that. So they like it because it's smaller candies. I'm not eating as much. Yes, but look at all the things that are happening inside the body that you can't account for. So that's really important. Then I noticed this year, a week after Halloween, Christmas goodies started coming up. Well, who's buying those in October and November? Adults are buying them. And you're not buying them for your kids. You're not going to keep them for 2 months. You're going to buy them when they're fresher. So a lot of people continue to delude themselves because of their psychological North American diet mentality madness. So it's very, very important. And again, just things like this. Andrea's just saying, you know, he loves his diet meals. Plus, how can you call them diet meals when you make them so tasty using the right, you know, you find the spices that work for you, all these things. And you got to eat what you eat. Like for me, I'll go into another time, but the way I grew up, I hated veggies, never liked them. So there's only a few that I will eat. So I cycle them on my diet days. So I never get tired of them. Whereas by contrast, what just popped into my head, you have all these, you know, physique contest gurus, and it's 5 meals of tilapia a day, you know, and it's 5 meals of green beans, and it's nothing else. You know, that, I mean, and you call yourself a nutritionist because you can do that. That makes absolutely no sense to me, but this is what passes for expertise out there these days. So, Andre, I think you should copy and paste all your comments from here and put them in a book or an article. I think you'll be, I think there's enough there for a 5,000 word article. So, hey, Henriette, everyone's saying, well, okay, well, that's pretty funny. But Darvin's just saying I should go back to coach bodybuilders and take one of my athletes to win the Olympia, and that way the whole fitness nonsense ideas would stop at once. Darvin, I'd go back to coaching bodybuilders right after I put a bullet through my brain. So I have absolutely zero interest in that world. And I think if anyone traveled the same distance I traveled in that world, they would have zero interest in it as well. So it's just the theater of the absurd, that world. And I was part of it, so I'm not saying I'm better than that, but thankfully I got out of it before it was too late. If I followed the path I was on, and this is, I'm going to do a video on this another time, but I have no doubt had I followed the path I was on when I was 260 pounds and doing photo shoots, I wouldn't have lived this long. I'd be one of the dead bodybuilders you'd be reading about. I had all the signs at the time. And so it makes me just no different. I just realized I'd rather live. So, and it was never for me about how impressed someone was with my physique anyway. It was always the inner journey with me, wanting to see what my body could do. So, if any of you see me gyrating here, it's just because Andy's dog Bob is getting in my face, because I'm Bob sitting. I'm Bob sitting. I'm dog to Bob here. So, and then Andy's just making a good point. Andy's just, you know, I said this in one of my articles on nutritionism way back. You know, Andy sat down and eaten an entire apple pie many times, I'm sure, with whipped cream, but he's never eaten an entire bag of apples in one sitting. This is exactly what we're talking about. All right. No one ever got fat from eating too many apples. All right. I've said that a million times. I've also used the movie theater example, that movie theaters offer a free refill of your popcorn. And I know people who that have trained that capitalize on that. They have a large family-sized popcorn and they go refill it. And the query that I posed to people in the Healthy Whole Foods was, imagine if that was full of carrot sticks and celery sticks. Would you get through a family-sized popcorn bag of those and want refill? No, because the body knows and it just stops eating. It's the same thing when I posted on Instagram a couple of weeks ago my lunch meal of my almonds and as much fruit as I can take. And so I took a picture of the fruit, and because of the nonsense in the competitor world now that you can't eat fruit either because that's just too much sugar. But it teaches that the body knows you reach satiation in a very natural way and you just stop eating. That seems to be lost on people, especially people who a long time ago competed. They have lost their hunger satiation. They no longer have a context for when, oh, I've had enough food. So that's a dangerous place to live. So people are always writing me and saying, oh, you know, I want to live the healthy, lean lifestyle and I want to compete. I'm so healthy. And I'm like, well, not if you want to compete, you're not. That's just the difference, folks. The world of difference between saying I'm now into fitness and I want to be healthy and lean and I'm going to compete. Well, that's beyond healthy and lean, and it's not healthy. And the leanness isn't a reflection of the health either. And you can do way more harm than good. So hopefully this is resonating with the people that are tuning in. Jennifer's just saying, oh, good. I'm glad when people say they're excited to hear one of my lectures. I'm always, you know, a little bit concerned at the end that I lived up to the hype. So important stuff. Oh, okay. You were at my Met workshop way back in 2008, almost a decade ago, Jennifer. Boy, you took your time. That's okay. So, and then Sharon's just said her coach has put her on Cocoa Pops and bagels post-workout meal. Wow. Sharon, if you followed this lecture, Sharon, then that statement answers itself. I don't want to use the word moron here about your coach, but it's ridiculous. They're trying to follow some old research that the window of opportunity after your workout, get in your sugars and blah, blah, blah. I debunked all that in a previous webinar, Sharon, and that M word wasn't directed at you, Sharon, not at all. You're just paying someone that you think knows what they're doing. The M word is directed at that person. And sometimes I'm even ashamed to be a coach in this industry when I see nonsense like that. It just mind-bogglingly that this stuff passes for knowledge and expertise. So, yeah, Sharon, you're not going to get anywhere with that. And not to mention, if I don't know when you came on here, maybe you're watching from the beginning, maybe you weren't. But if you're going to do that, you're just going to be teasing your taste buds to want more of it. And eventually you'll succumb to that if you're in a constantly calorie-deprived state. So that's not going to do much. So Tony's just saying, boy, you guys have good comments. Tony's just saying, thanks, coach. Got rid of my morning pre-workout drink at your suggestion. Saved $120 a month. Haven't missed a beat. In fact, even more energy eating real food. Yes. Now, you just reminded me, in the book, Modern Nutrition and Health and Disease, I tried to find some research I referred to before, and I couldn't find it. You know, go figure, it's a 3,000-page book. I couldn't find one study I was looking for that's a paragraph long. But it showed how vegetarians or flexitarians, people who eat the most plant-based, have the higher and most efficient metabolism. So I wish all these keto idiots would latch onto that. I tried to find that right now because this topic is about metabolic optimization, but after an hour I couldn't find it. Like I said, it's 3,000 pages, and let me just show you. I've got so much of it. As you can see, all the pages that I've marked. So by the time I went through all that, you know, I might as well have been researching a book. So I tried to get the one I was looking for, but couldn't get it. Hopefully you guys will trust me on that one. So, yeah. And then Mary's just saying, surprised any coach would encourage Cocoa Pops. The thing there, Mary, is I know what this lady's talking about. It's these wannabes out there who follow little pieces of research that other people who are selling crap try to blow up. And they sell you this window of opportunity and all this other nonsense. And this is where you get this in and where you get that in. And it's unfortunate, but it does come from somewhere. So, you know, it's not just, you know, that person actually thinks they know what they're talking about. That's the sad part. And again, Sharon, if I'm saying that right, I'm not sure. But if your goal is to lose weight, as you asked, because you said my coach has put me on Cocoa Pops and bagels post-workout meal, does that stop on my fat loss goals? Yes, absolutely. If your goal is fat loss, then that absolutely gets in the way of that. All you need is calorie control throughout the day. The window of opportunity is something that only applies to very specific athletes and very specific windows of time in terms of training at highest work capacity and training over 90 minutes at a time and all these other things that go into that. It's not a blanket assertion that applies to everybody. It won't apply, I would say, to even one person listening to this webinar, including myself. So that's how that nonsense gets going. So that's it. Again, numbers a little low. I think next week, folks, I'm going to try maybe Friday early evening, and I'll try to do that, see how that time slot works, and see how that gets to you. So again, you know, some of the research involved, you can see there, some of my resources anyway, and there's ample amounts of research in there. And then you can read through the comments to see that Perry has indeed posted the exact citation. But here it is: postprandial energy expenditure on whole food and processed food meals, implications for daily expenditure. And then, you know, what we see is that, you know, you're going to likely gain weight processed foods have a likelihood of making you fatter. Diets with higher proportion of processed foods will result in increased energy assimilation and may be a contributor to weight gain. And that's even in a calorie-controlled scenario. So hopefully, this was a benefit to you guys. If so, I mean, please, by all means, hit the share button. Let's get people on board. The more people I speak to, the happier I am in terms of getting it out there. It's funny how the nominal numbers, and then I look at people with massive followers who spew nonsense. But that's the nature of the online world, especially social media. So hopefully, folks, you benefited from this. If you did, throw some emoticons across the screen, hit the share button. But that's the straight and narrow on the difference between my cycle diet and if it fits your macros. And I barely scratched the surface, but if it fits your macros, even though it has thousands of followers online in the honeymoon period, no doubt, it's not a way to go for sustainable weight loss, and especially if you're trying to get lean. So always glad to see you out there, folks. If you weren't out there, it wouldn't make much sense for me to be here. So hopefully I will see you all next week, likely on Friday at some time. And then we'll take it from there. In a couple of weeks, let's see your ideas on this. I'm looking in a couple of weeks from now of doing all my workouts in the dungeon live on Facebook. So instead of a lecture, I thought I would do something training with limitations since of my age and everything. I've got several limitations, and I thought I would do just a week of my workouts and how I work around those limitations and show that it can be done, whatever your limitations might be. So thought I might do that, not next week, but the week after, and just be live from the dungeon, and then sort of just do my workouts live, not to... just to impart some training stuff while I'm doing that. So hopefully people will tune into that, watch this old physique after 50 do his thing, but to try to teach something at the same time. So that's it for this week, folks. I will hopefully see you all next week. Thanks for attending, and I hope you got something out of this, and I will see you next time.